Welcome to Module 1, Session 3, Bodies and Cultures. In this session, we will explore how bodies and cultural representations intersect with disability studies, special pedagogy, and inclusive music teaching. The concept of bodies is not only physical, but also symbolic, shaped by cultural narratives and power structures. Understanding these intersections is essential to foster inclusivity in music and education. At the end of this session, you will be able to understand the historical and cultural representation of disability, examine the role of disability in freak studies, analyze theories of disability and power by Foucault, explore deaf studies, reflect on autism and educational approaches, analyze the intersectionality of disability with race, gender, and class. Freak studies represent a subfield within disability studies that examine how society in the past exploited bodies perceived as abnormal. Scholars like Robert Bogdan and Rosemary Garland Thompson have studied how individuals labeled as freaks were displayed for public consumption. People such as Julia Pastrana and performance in freak shows were not only viewed with curiosity, but often subjected to exploitation and objectification. From General Tom Thumb, the Connecticut dwarf who enchanted Queen Victoria, to Millie and Christine, the Siamese African-American sisters who lived their entire lives as slaves of third parties as well as each other, from Barnum's Circus to the film of Todd Browning and Federico Fellini, from the Hottentot Venus, whose enormous buttocks in 1815 sent half of Paris into confusion, to Lady Olga Barnell, who, in spite of her moustache and 33 centimeters beard, married 4 times. The freak nature has always been synonymous with anomaly. Michel Foucault's work on power, normalization, and societal control provides an important lens for understanding disability. Foucault explored how societies create norms and how bodies that do not conform to these norms are controlled through various institutions, such as medicine and education. This framework helps us analyze how disabled bodies are regulated and marginalized, offering a critical perspective on societal power dynamics. Different contributions focused on deaf studies, an important subfield of disability studies with a long history of activism and scholarship. This field of study includes references to figures such as l'Abbé de l'Épée and Alexander Graham Bell, who were central to early education and technology for deaf individuals. A central debate within deaf studies is between sign language proponents and oralists, those who believed deaf individuals should be taught to speak and lip read rather than use sign language. The deaf community has long been identity-based, with scholars like Leonard Davis and Paddy Lett exploring the political and cultural significance of this debate. The tension between oralism and sign language reflects broader issues of control, autonomy, and identity in the lives of deaf individuals. Another subfield of disability studies is represented by the studies on intellectual disability. Trends Inventing the Feeble Mind examines the historical origins and social mechanisms behind the classification of intellectual disability in the United States, revealing how societal biases shaped perceptions of mental incapacity. Mark Radley's The Social Construction of Intellectual Disability explores how intellectual disability is not an inherent condition, but rather a label constructed by social, institutional, and political forces, challenging conventional understanding of disability. Gerald O'Brien, in his volume Framing the Moron, dwells the early 20th century American eugenetics movement, highlighting how social policies and scientific rhetoric frame individuals labeled as morons as a threat to societal progress. It reveals how this framing influenced public perception and justified discriminatory practices, including sterilization and institutionalization. Patrick McMonag's Idiocy, A Cultural History, traces the shifting cultural meanings of idiocy from the medieval period to the present, examining how this label has been used to marginalize individuals and reflect societal anxieties. Licia Carlson's The Phases of Intellectual Disability explores how the concept of intellectual disability has been represented in philosophy, medicine, and law, revealing the interplay between power, identity, and exclusion. Goody's A Story of Intelligence and Intellectual Disability uncovers the historical evolution of the idea of intelligence and intellectual disability, arguing that these concepts have been shaped by cultural, political, and economic forces across centuries. Another important milestone in disability studies is represented by Fernand Deligny's work. Fernand Deligny's work with autistic children presents a unique pedagogical approach based on observing their actions and movements rather than imposing structured communication. Deligny rejected traditional pedagogical and therapeutic methods, arguing that these often serve to reinforce societal norms rather than genuinely accommodate the needs and experiences of autistic individuals. His work emphasizes the importance of observing and understanding behavior in its own right, without forcing it into pre-existing frameworks of normal behavior. Deligny was for sure a frontier educator, inspired by scholars, researchers, and pedagogists like Celestin Freinet and Anton Makarenko, and he used what he called lignes d'air, lines of drift, to map the movements of autistic children without attempting to intervene. It was just a matter of transcribing those journeys for nothing to see, to not have to talk about those children, to evade name and surname, to foil the artifice of the he that becomes the rigueur as soon as the other is spoken. So this is the map of region of our practice that places, says Deligny, tracing at the antipodes of listening. For a few weeks, one of us living together with 3 or 4 mutacious children transcribed their free journeys on sheets of transparent paper placed on a map of the territory without borders. Deligny saw cinema as a valuable pedagogical tool. His collaboration with filmmakers like François Truffaut and his use of the camera to document and study the actions of autistic children reflect his innovative approach to pedagogy. Movies like Le Moindre Geste and Ce gamin-là showcase this method of observing rather than intervening, using the camera to capture raw, unfiltered human behavior. Among others, one outstanding book by Fernand Deligny is A comme asile, A like asylum, which discusses the evolution of educational and medical institutions from places that alienated to more human and inclusive spaces. However, Deligny critiques the traditional role of educators and medical professionals, arguing for a shift from pedagogy to anthropology. This transition calls for educators to adopt a more observational and less interventionist approach, one that values human differences without attempting to fix or alter them. By proposing innovative practices, Deligny moves away from seeing education as a solution to a problem. One of the last fields of disability studies, last areas of research, is concerned with hybridization and intersectionality. So hybridization refers to how disability intersects with race, gender, and class. This is also called creep theory. Besides this book, there are different books on hybridization, race, gender, and class. Understanding disability through these multiple lenses allows for a richer and more nuanced approach, as each of these identities brings its own experiences of marginalization and privilege. By integrating these perspectives, disability studies become more inclusive, acknowledging that individuals' experiences with disabilities are shaped by their broader social and cultural identities. This intersectional approach helps deconstruct the notion of a universal disabled experience and instead highlights the diversity within disability. Thank you for your attention.